Well, as we were just hearing, almost 1 year ago today that the lights went up at the Olympic Park in London. For many people, as we were hearing, it truly was an incredible moment. But there were definitely lessons to be learned, lessons for those cities that are planning on hosting the Olympics in the future. So let's take you across now to the World's Newsroom. We can join Tom, who is there for us. Tom, what have you got for us?
Well, Lucy, you know that London's a pretty international city at the best of times, but for 2 weeks a year ago, you had a good chance of bumping into pretty much anyone for any country on this planet. Now, we're marking the first year anniversary of the London Olympics with a bit of a race around the BBC's World Newsroom. And why not start in London? Because those games were considered a massive success from a lot of people. And one man that saw that action play by play was the BBC's Alex Capstick. Now, Alex, every Games has to define a legacy. How's London shaping up right now?
I think, Tom, it's quite positive. Certainly it's difficult to argue that the Olympic Park, which rose out of that bit of wasteland in East London, hasn't been a success, although the padlocks were put on the gates. No sooner had the closing ceremony to the Paralympics finished, that was because it was turned into a building site again, so they could remove temporary venues and convert existing ones into permanent use. And all 8 of those projects have found tenants, and that's unusual. There are no white elephants, unusual when you compare it with previous Olympic cities. More difficult to judge has been the other commitment made by Sebastian Coe when London won the right to host the Games back in 2005. He said it would inspire a generation. More people would play sport as a result of the Olympics. Now, surveys and polls, including one by the BBC, suggest that that is happening, although other people will say, well, look, it needs a more cohesive, joined-up approach by government, National Health Service, schools, local councils, that sort of thing. That's not quite happening yet. And they also say that, to give a proper verdict on legacy, you need to wait another 10, 15 years.
Okay, thanks, Alex. One word, your favourite moment from the 2012 Games?
Oh, blimey, Usain Bolt has to be, doesn't it?
Great, thanks, Alex. Let's go on to Brazil now. Now, they're taking the baton for these Games, and first South American country to host them. It's a big moment for Brazil, but they have been plagued with a few offsets so far. One remembers the mass protests recently, and one man that can talk pretty well on that is Bruno Garcés from BBC Mundo. Now, Bruno, you're from Brazil. You have contacts there. What's the mood towards the Olympics right now?
Well, I think right now the concerns are more towards the World Cup. But there are fears that Brazil, after all that we've seen, the protests and the police reaction to them, sometimes an overreaction, and in many occasions police brutality has been witnessed. There are concerns that Brazil might not be up to the task to host such a big event. I think push comes to shove, when the time is up, Brazil will be there, will be ready, will be apt. But there are, of course, fears after what we've seen in the Confederations Cup, what we're seeing right now. I mean, there are protests as the Pope visits Rio, and with tear gas being thrown all over, with confrontations between demonstrators and police officers. So I think up to then we probably will have to see some reforms going on, some kind of training for the police to be up to the task as well.
Yep.
And I think that's mainly, right now I think that's the main concern, I would say.
Okay, thanks Bruno, thanks very much. Now what's next? Well, there's a 3-horse race at the moment. Madrid, Tokyo, and my next guest knows about the host city to be perhaps for 2020, and that's Istanbul. Now, it's a far cry because Istanbul has had some protests as well of late, and my colleague here from BBC Turkish, Sheriff Ishtar, knows a lot about that as well. So, Sheriff, what are the chances that Turkey are going to host the 2020 Games?
Now, Turkey has been bidding for the Olympics for a very long time now, and the first Olympics that it seriously bid on was the 2000 Olympics. So it has had some time to prepare its bid. Now it's in the final 3, and each time the major question has been infrastructure. And now Turkey says that it will be investing in infrastructure and it will be all fine. But you made a very good point there, the social situation. Before I came on air, I actually put out a call asking people about the Olympics and their legacy, let's say. And one of my friends from Sydney, which of course was an Olympic host as well, pointed out the social cost of it. It can go really well, like in London, when you invest in local community, but if locals feel that the interests of the guests coming to the country are trumping the interests of the locals, then it can have a major social cost, rather it can be a deterrent. So it really remains to be seen what path this situation would take with Turkey. However, it is pretty clear that the social aspect, given the recent protests, will be on the minds of the committee when discussing Istanbul's bid.
Sheriff, thank you very much. And there you go, Lucy, a sprint around the Olympic newsroom, all in record time.
Tom, we think you should be in training as well with all that whizzing around. Thanks so much for showing us the world's newsroom in such depth there.